Let us start the session by chanting Namo Tassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavatu Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavatu Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavatu Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. All right. So, if we turn to the sutra that we will be doing today, so that is page number 90, please. All right. So the Lonaphala Sutta, the sutta that we have chosen for today, is the discourse on the parable of salt, right? Lona means salt. So this parable this sutta is quite an important sutta with relations to the discussion of karma. And also this sutta outlines a very important part concerning karma, or concerning the foundations of karma as taught by the Buddha, against the philosophy of karma which was existent in India through the philosophy of Brahmanism, right? Through the philosophy of Brahmanism. So to essentially completely understand the natures, or the natures which this sutta actually starts with, having an understanding of Brahmanism and how or what karma, or the philosophy or the theory of karma, or the concept of karma, how the concept of karma was used in ancient India by Brahmanism, or the religion of Brahmanism, is quite important. So we will come to all of that, right? Within this sutta, there are two important parts. One is the theory on karma itself. The second being this, where the sutra speaks on two kinds of self, which is the great self or the small self, right? We will come into that section. These two parts makes this sutta a sutta that has been, or which is looked into as one of those core suttas discerning what karma is, right? So let's start the sutta. Page number 90. Lonaphala Sutta, the discourse on the salt crystal. The discourse on the salt crystal. Whoever bhikkhus were to say thus, whatever karma this person has done, he would experience that very same karma. This being so, there is no living of the holy life. There appears to be no opportunity for the utter ending of suffering. Page number 90, Dale. Yeah? But bhikkhus, whoever were to say thus, whatever karma experienceable in certain way that a person does, he would experience its ripening in just that way. Now, I know that in English, these two sentences doesn't seem very different from one another, isn't it? I mean, if you go through it, to us, it just looks the same, really, and seems like it means the same thing. right? And that is very true, and also a point that has led to very controversial debate among scholars studying this sutta. So we are taken back into the Pali to sort of discover what this is really insinuating, right? What this is really insinuating. Then, page number 91, we will come to that Pali, don't worry. Then, there is the living of the holy life, the opportunity for the utter ending of suffering. Here, bhikkhus. Here, bhikkhus, a certain person has done only, okay, before we go there. Now, in the ancient philosophy of Brahmanism, we know that the caste system had a lot to do with Brahmanism. Essentially, Brahmins were the top of this ladder, right? The Brahmins, followed by the kings and the queens and the ministers, the Shastriyas, and then the merchants, and then the workers who were of the serving class to the classes above, right? And in early parts of karma, the act of karma is referred to only in places of sacrificial rites and ceremonies, right? So, for example, now in Sinhalese language, when bhikkhus are committing the Vinaya Kamma of Uposatha, we call it Vinaya Kamma, right? Vinaya Kamma. Now here, Kamma does not refer to the philosophy of karma, of, reaping what you sow. It refers to the Sinhala word krutya, or act, right? Vinaya Kamma, right? The act of Vinaya, the act of the moral code of monks, right? Back,
Yeah.
back in the day, with Brahmanism, the early stages of karma, or the way that karma was understood, was in a way of sacrificial actions. Towards whom? Of course, towards the gods, right? So sacrificing animals and all of that. There was no virtuous aspect to karma. It was only a sacrificial practice towards the gods. Later on, as actually Professor Kalupana states, that it is only later on, with the inception of Buddhism, that the karmic or karma, or the way karma was looked at, was then changed. It went through a significant transformation, and an ethical ingredient was added into the pot of karma of Brahmanism, right? Then you had the ethical aspects coming in, which referred to, of course, loving kindness and all of these good stuff, right? Now, when we refer to, or when you go to or read through the first paragraph, right? In Brahmanism, there was this thought where when you are something and when you do something, right, an action, you are going to experience a equally similar result owing to that action, right? Which often, to put it in a sense of an example, is, for example, if you might kill a cockroach, you will be born and you will die the same horrific death as a cockroach. You know what I mean? Right? So, in that sort of a way, it was, the teaching was wholly upon the fact of, okay, if you do this, you're going to get this, right? And this exact, in its exact intensity, is going to be experienced in your next birth. This is what is refuted by the Buddha here in the first paragraph. The second paragraph, the Buddha relates to the ability of, yes, committing a karma, but now we must switch over to the Buddha's initiation of the philosophy of karma to say, when a karma is committed or an act is done through bodily or verbal means, the karma that is generated has potential of giving rise in the future in whatsoever ways. Right? So this does not mean, or this does not close down to the extreme fact that you will in it exact way experience its fruits in the next birth. However, there can be similarities, but this is only potential. Owing to then the ability that a person can turn a new leaf, can change that person's destiny, right? Or actually, I shouldn't be using the word destiny, but change that person's course of life and how that person lives and how that person behaves oneself, or the society that that person is able to reach. Where the Buddha talks about now, this philosophy of karma, or the Buddha's philosophy of karma, was not oppressive. Rather, it gave potential and was rather liberating. Right? We will speak more about it to come. Now, then okay. Here, bhikkhus, page number 91. Here, bhikkhus, a certain person has done only a slight bad karma, but it takes him to hell. Here again, bhikkhus, for another person, such a slight bad karma that is experienced right here and now is not experienced in the least. How would it ever be abundant at all? Bhikkhus, what sort of a person has done only a slight bad karma, but it takes him to hell? Here, bhikkhus, a certain person is of uncultivated body, uncultivated moral conduct, uncultivated mind, and uncultivated wisdom. He is mentally limited with a small self, dwelling with little suffering, right? Now, this is where this aspect of great self and small self is brought into light. By great self, what is referred to, or what a person who is considered as a great self, is a person who has some sort of moral value cultivation in his life, in mind, speech, and body, right? In mind, speech, and body. Now, this is further explained. This is further explained by a number of parables we will come to. However, it must be understood now, understanding what a great self is and then understanding what a small self might be. A great self, cultivating a great self, is to mean that this person is one who is developed. In the books, essentially refer to one who has great self as a person who is a Sotapanna, Sakudagami, and an Anagami. Not an Arahant, but those earlier three classes of attainment. But this could also refer to people who have jhanas, people who are or live with wholesome contemplations. These sorts of actions differ the results of karma, right? The results of karma to a certain extent, not in its entirety, but it has a great effect upon what sorts of karmas give rise. What sort of karmas give rise? Now, when we look at karma, we have the consciousness on one side. We have those that the consciousness has a way that it operates, where without the teachings of the Buddha, we would be stuck in this cycle of rebirth and death, where we keep on happening again and again and again and again, right? Thus, speaking about what gives the Chitta that ability or that part where it creates new rebirth, it is the fact of the anusaya, the latent tendencies, the root of all the hindrances that come or we see, right? The anusaya, the karma, and the consciousness, these three parts are seen as the internal or the being in aspects. Now, when we refer to the being, right, we might only see nama and rupa. With relation to the fact of rebirth, with continued existence beyond and after this body, this specific body, that being who crosses over from body to body, moves over from body to body through the samsaric journey of rebirth and death, adopting different mentalities, mind setups, and all of these things, that being is a composition of anusaya, karma, and this consciousness. This consciousness. The way that this is linked, we really don't know that much about it, right? Even in the Abhidhamma, we do not know much about it, about how these things are linked. However, I suppose in calling it a being altogether, there is a hue of identification which plays a parallel role between all three different classes of consciousness, anusaya, and karma. Because karma is effectively not going to go and affect someone else. It is only going to be affecting us because it is our karma, right? So clearly there is a bondage between these three, right? In a way that we do not or have not been explained in a way that it has not been explained in the books, right? When karma gives its result, it is wholly not dependent upon past karma. When karma gives result, right? I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. When karma gives its result, we know, or when we experience certain difficulties in life, blah, 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 all those difficulties cannot be linked to karma or past karma, right? There are certain actions that we do that creates negative emotions and negative interactions wholly because of bad decisions or decisions that we have made right now, right? Maybe not even bad decisions, maybe decisions which should have been done, for example, like disciplining one's child, which is something that you have to do, and it's going to lead in some sort of telling off between the two parties often, right? Now, this potency, this linkage between needs to be supported by different factors. When behaviors, when the self, when the being has chosen to take a higher path, and by higher path, what I mean is a wholesome path, a path which is on the path of nirvana, a path which is now working with the aspects of not stretching out or not extending one's time in samsara, but actually trying to reduce it, being awake and woke to the reality of the world. When such kind of a being, or when a being takes such kind of a new leaf in life, what essentially happens is this affects the effects or how even Anusaya gives its rise, of how even Anusaya would work within a being, right? When Anusaya is affected, what would then follow is that, of course, we know the consciousness is affected. We don't need to talk about that, right? But with it, what happens is even the whole karmic path is now in a way changed. Now, there are certain decisions that one makes in life that can really change a karmic path. For example, becoming a monk is one of them, right? Becoming a monk and sort of really living a monk's life is actually a very powerful way of changing or affecting one's anusaya, where now even the karma is affected, right? Where even the karma is affected. And this is actually also spoken of in the Vedas, right? In the Vedas, in the study of the stars, right? As well. But we are not bothered about that. What we are bothered about is what the Buddha says, right? Because this is a sutra class, right? So now when within just the aspect of this right here, when talking about a great self and a small self, right? When actions are done, when deeds are done, whether wholesome or unwholesome, the aspect or the strength of these actions are or can be different to a person who is or who does something with an uncultivated mind or a small self, as referred to in the sutta, right? This is because of the effect upon anusaya, the effect anusaya has on the rest of the other factors, right? That is why I started off with these three being concept, right? Because when anusaya is affected, essentially the whole energy that you live life with is now affected. The consciousnesses that are experienced on a daily basis are different. We imagine when a person attains, for example, let's say the higher jhanas, the fifth jhana, the fourth jhana, a person who, let's say, the fifth jhana, and maybe even gone into the arupa jhanas, such a person does not bother with going back into the lower jhanas. Not that he can't, he can. However, he does not bother. For what? Because why? The anusaya plus all the other states of hindrances which are present at a shallow level of mind are now suppressed so deeply and so profoundly that the bliss arising from the fifth jhana is so much more blissful and pleasant than what the earlier jhanas could ever provide. Hence, through experience, the meditator is a different man, a different person. Because wholly due to the state of experience. Experience of what? It is not only the jhana factors, but what makes the jhana factors be there or at that level, which is the suppressing of the hindrances, right? The suppressing of the hindrances allows the flourishing of the jhana factors. Even if you had the jhana factors, which we all do, by the way, remember, we all already have the jhana factors. The thing is that they're not jhana factors as yet, right? They're only states of chetasikas, states of chetasikas, isn't it? Right? They're not at that level yet. Having the jhana factors, so hence does not mean anything without its respective suppressing of the hindrances. And this mind is powerful. Going back to rishis and all these holy people, and I mean holy people, right? This aspect of blessing that people through so much time, in history, this act of blessing or giving of blessing or receiving of blessing has been a huge thing, isn't it, in the East? It's not 100 years or 1,000 years. I mean, this goes back to the time of the rishis in the Himalayas, right? The main reason that people up to today bathe in the river Ganges is because they believe that the rishis are bathing at the foothills of the Himalayas. Hence, they get the vibrations of the rishis blessing their life, right? Blessing their life. Hence, they bathe in the Ganges even today, right? Of course, there are parts of the Ganges that are absolutely dirty, but there are parts of the Ganges which are nice as well, right? So people, regardless, people bathe in both, right? Now, this act of blessing is an act which was committed or done by beings who were holy. Holy by the power of the state of consciousness, right? Holy by the power of the state of consciousness. This consciousness, or being able to direct one's attention towards a person who might be unhappy, who might be going through certain ailments, who might be going through some sort of difficulty in life, physical or mental, receiving this sort of attention from a holy being did so much. Now, a story of one of my very close devotees is after this devotee, after this devotee's mother passed away, right? I mean, she, for 15 years, she was complaining, or what she said was that she was being possessed by the mother, right? So she would sort of start howling and screaming, and they are a very how can I say? I mean, I wouldn't call them. They are a very intelligent family. It's not right to say that. They were an educated family. They had their businesses. They were not from from a class of society who would sort of be about all of these things. They were, they had a bit of logic to think. However, this woman would sort of be possessed, and she would start howling and screaming and all of these things, up until a Hamdro comes and chants, or something like of that sort, where then she would calm down. And this went on for, I think, about 10 years, up until at Buddha Gaya she met this venerable, who was a Sri Lankan, but he used to meditate in the Himalayan jungles. And he was a very highly attained venerable who we all knew about as monks as well, due to him being such a respected practitioner of the Dhamma, who would sort of go into these very treacherous areas and sort of practice in snow and all these high altitude climates and all of that. And what this was the first time that this devotee saw this monk, and she was excited. She had heard about him, but for her good fortune, this monk was at the time at Bodh Gaya, and he was meditating, and he was at the time, doing a flower arrangement of some sort to offer the Buddha or something like that, right? And she goes running to this monk, and she sort of explains her sort of agony, right? The agony being that, all of a sudden, she loses control and this is happening, and she thinks that this is the mother, and, all of this, right? And then she goes on sort of explaining her situation, of course, in tears. And this monk starts practicing metta towards this lady, right? And what she told me was, and when he practices metta, he goes into this trance, right? He goes into this trance, and you literally can feel it. I mean, you can feel it in your body. It is as if someone is actually massaging your body. It's very powerful, right? It's very powerful. And that is because, I mean, I'm not insinuating, I've been with him. I know, right? Because I've experienced the same from him. And what she explained about the experience was, she got this sort of like a thundering sort of knock on her back, almost so powerful that would make you sort of grasp, right? Like a thundering knock on her back. And then she felt a little bit sort of faintish, and then she sort of excused herself and worshipped the monk and all of that and left. And since that day she did not have this, or she was not possessed again since that day, and she was well, right? And of course, I know the whole family, I know the children are closer to me than the parents, and so I know that this story is true, right? This ability, this blessing, is something which we all believe in very, very truly. We all believe in it. This blessing is given through this act of sort of a concentrated mind. In a similar way, when the person who is having the cultivated mind lives with the cultivated mind, in a similar way, you have a sense of protection. A sense of protection, not efficiently by the power of the Buddha, but really by the power of your own consciousness, by the power of your vibrations of body, mind, right? Which creates that power in your life, right? So now let us move on. The simile of the salt crystal. No, I think yes. The simile of the salt crystal. Bhikkhus, suppose a person were to drop a salt crystal in a small bowl of water. What do you think, bhikkhus? Would the water in the small bowl become salty on account of that salt crystal and be unfit to drink? Yes, Bhante. Why is that? That bowl of water, Bhante, has only a little water, so that it becomes salty because of the salt crystal and would be unfit to drink. Unfit to drink. Bhikkhus, suppose a person were to drop a salt crystal in the Ganges river. What do you think, bhikkhus? Would the water in the Ganges river become salty on account of the salt crystal and become unfit to drink? No, Bhante. Why is that? That Ganges river, Bhante, is a great body of water, so that it does not become salty because of the salt crystal and would not be unfit to drink. In the same way, bhikkhus, here a certain person is one, in the same way, bhikkhus, here a certain person is one has done only a slight bad karma but takes him to hell. But here again, for another person, such a slight bad karma experienceable right here and now is not experienced in the least. How would it ever be abundant at all? Bhikkhus, what sort of person done only a slight bad karma but takes him to hell? Here, bhikkhus, a certain person is of uncultivated body, uncultivated moral conduct, uncultivated mind, uncultivated wisdom. He is limited. He has a small self. He dwells with little suffering. Such a person, bhikkhus, has done only a slight bad karma, but it takes him to hell. Bhikkhus, what sort of person has done such a slight bad karma experience with here, right here and now, but which he does not experience in the least? How would it ever be abundant at all? Here, bhikkhus, a certain person is of cultivated body, cultivated moral conduct, cultivated mind, cultivated wisdom. He is mentally unlimited, with a great self who dwells immeasurable. Such a person, bhikkhus, has done such a slight bad karma that is experienceable right here and now, but which he does not experience in the least. How could it be abundant at all? Right? How could it be? Then we go into the parables. Right? The first parable is, right, now we are way too familiar with these sorts of stories, right? The first parable is, there is a person who steals half a gold coin. Having stolen half a gold coin, this person is thrown into jail. What kind of person is this person? This person would be a poor, a, a poor, a person not of high caste or clan, a person who might be just a normal, very normal person. But then there is a person who steals not half a coin, but a full coin, or maybe hundreds of coins. But he does not or is not thrown to jail. What kind of person is this person? This person might be a very rich person, a person with power and who is a distinguished, prestigious person within society and the community. He is not affected by the least of his actions. That person is like the person who is called a great self, right? Who is called a great self. Is that bhikkhus, the parable of the poor and rich. Bhikkhus, suppose a butcher or a sheep slaughterer is able to strike or bind or disposes or do as he likes to someone without permission who has taken away his ram, right? He would do whatever he wants. To what kind of person can he do whatever he wants? He can do it to someone who is poorer than him, who does not have uh, of little possession and means. But then there is a person who takes away his ram, but he is unable to do anything to him. What kind of person is that? But he can't, the person who he can't do much to. That person might be a wealthy person having great wealth and means. He cannot touch. He cannot touch. A great, the person here, just like the poorer person is affected by this thing that he has done, the person who is powerful and wealthy is unaffected. Just like the slight karma might take this poor person to hell, it might not affect the person who is of higher distinction. Here, the high distinction is drawn parallels with nothing else other than the fact of a cultivated mind. Right? Other than the fact of a cultivated mind. We are going to go into how that happens. Right? Cultivated mind. So, whatever karma, last page, whatever karma this person has done, he would experience that very same karma. This being so, bhikkhus, there is no living of the holy life. There appears to be no opportunity for the utter ending of suffering, but bhikkhus, for one who says thus, whatever karma experienceable in a certain way that person does, he would experience its ripening in just that way. Then there is living of the holy life, the opportunity for the utter ending of suffering, right? The opportunity for the utter ending of suffering. Now, the great self and the smaller self, right? The great self and the great self and the smaller self. As we talk about the latent tendencies which governs the mind and what its ability is at this present moment, and in the way that it gives a result in mind to experience states of consciousness that the mind has potential to experience at that very moment, it should be understood that in the classification of karma, karmas are always seen, right, to be operating or can operate on a mundane ground and a supramundane ground. The supramundane grounds of karma being far more powerful than any of its mundane counterparts. Any of its mundane counterparts. Now, through the philosophy of, or through Abhidhamma, we know that karma is linked into javana, right? The first javana being the javana that gives rise to Ditta Dhamma Vedaniya karma, which is the karma that one would experience right at this birth. And then the last karma, or the last javana, being the javana that would create karmas that could even be experienced by Buddhas, right? Even at the time of enlightenment. The second up until the sixth being karmas that can be, or that can arise from the very next birth up until the birth of enlightenment, or at the birth, till the birth that you attain and achieve enlightenment, right? Now these series of karmas are, or when developed, joins, modifies the karmas of the stream of karmic energy, like anusaya, like consciousness, what is of that moment in that nature of karma. If we are to take, now I want you to imagine, imagine three strings, right? Imagine three strings. And these three strings are interwoven, not interwoven, kind of braided, right? Kind of braided together, right? And these three strings, karma, anusaya, and consciousness, right? As it goes on, these three has a mutual conditioning between them that changes and affects what, or the level or intensity or power that they have at that specific moment in time, right? Specific moment in time. With certain accounts found in the Milinda Panha, we know that a person who does something without knowledge, that person creates more binding karma than the person who commits the same action of maybe of same equal wrong, but that person who does it knowing creates less binding karma, hence making the karmic potency weaker compared to that person who commits or does that same action without knowledge. Hence, concluding that ignorance is definitely not bliss. When such kind of a law affects that karma, from that first part, from the Milinda Panna, we know that knowledge, why does knowledge here become such a predominant factor in the nature that binds karma to us more strongly, lengthening our samsara even more greatly? That is because of ditti, view, right? The wrong view or the level of ditti that we have, because of this level of ditti and there being no knowledge, jnana, the action which would be done would be grasped, held, without any sort of guilt, without any sort of remorse, right? It would be grasped fully. Whereas with knowledge, there would be some sort of guilt. Oh my gosh, I'm doing something wrong. I shouldn't be doing this, but I have no other choice, right? There is a sense of guilt. The sense of guilt in that weakens the grasping nature of the mind to the karma or the act that is performed. Hence, a lesser result, right? A lesser result, not no result, a lesser result. In a similar way, when karmas have, or when we go around, now we know of the story, I don't know whether you know the story, where there's a whole sutra on it, how a drunkard becomes an enlightened being, right? Now, a specific part of that sutta shows how, shows how, shows, shows how one self, that is a self which is now, right? One self, that is a self which is now, and let's talk, now let's take a person, right? Let's say we all used to drink very badly, right? Now this was 20 years ago or 10 years ago, right? Now we have this person right now, right? Just for the fact of examples, yeah? We used to drink very badly, right? Many, many years ago, right? Now we have this person here who is now. And this person who we have here is very much committed to wholesome living, healthy living, a meditator, a person of Dhamma, a person who, with no rule of measurement, can in any way sort of be drawn parallels with that person who was in the past, in exacting somewhat of a feel of metamorphosis, right? A complete and utter change from that person of the past to this person who is now. This disconnection is highly spoken about in karma. Actually, it is in the Lonaphala Sutta, right? What is this disconnection? Now, please question me if you have any doubts, yeah? What is this disconnection? This disconnection is brought about by, that feeling, that thought in mind, which says that always guilts you to the actions that you have done in the past, right? Now, you are a person of Dhamma now, right? However, maybe 5 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, you did something, which was utterly, completely foolish, and you still regret it. You might be a person of Dhamma now, but there is no disconnection. There are, in your mind, there are parts still holding on to very strongly to that act which was done many years ago. Thus, that power of karma, or that karma generated by that action, has more potency right now than ever before, right? Or has potency now because of that mental connection between X 10 years ago and X who is now. When a person develops a mind of vipassana, when a person who in this frame of mind is known or would be known as a great person, right? Cultivated mind, practices that which is wholesome, is a true experiencer of that which is good in this world, right? And lives profoundly together with those aspects of the holy life or wholesome life, that person does not connect with those actions which were done in the past. To some of you, even to me, this might seem like, okay, is this forgetting? No, this is not forgetting. This is pure, intensive understanding. Understanding of what? Understanding of cause and effect. This is not forgetting. You do not forget. This is understanding. Understanding cuts the link between you thinking that you are that person. Hence, in reality, what you truly are, you are a different person. Right? That you are a different person. Hence, examples such as Angulimala, Patachara, Chinchimanikya, all these prostitutes, murderers, and all these people, the cut happened. The person who was the murderer, the person who was the plunderer, the person who was the prostitute, the person who was defiant to everything that is wholesome is a person of the past. And the person who is now is of different cause and effect. When the mind has gone through this transformation due and owing to the bliss created by the practice through strong investigation into the aspects of vipassana in daily life, gives rise to this ability. That is why within the sutta, within the commentaries, the person with the great self is only known to be Sotapanna, Sakuddagami, and Anagami. Why? Because mundane people often have a very difficult time disconnecting. We cling on to identity and we cling on to those stories of identity as me, myself, and I. That is why specifically, this is not to say that it can't be a person. It can be a person, but we often cling to the past. So what we are, or however we might try to run away from that past, that is only possible through real, deep, vipassana-based insights. Really getting to know cause and effect of that specific moment which made you take or make those specific decisions which led to those specific results, now it being different. Now it being different. This connection, however, the Buddha speaks about this. For example, when a person determines, I'm rambling on, so if you want to ask me a question, you can as well, okay? Just to let you know. When a monk or when a person wants to become a monk, remember the 10 questions that they are asked, right? Are you in doubt? I'm sorry, are you in debt? Right? Are you married? Or are you under the protection of your parents? If you are, have you got their permission? If you have not, you have sent back to get their permission, right? You can only ordain as a monk with permission, right? Or the parents have to be mithya drushtika. Then you can ordain as a monk, which was an allowance which was given to some of the relatives of the Buddha, remember, right? whose parents were Mithya Dushrika, and they were sort of strong Brahmins, and they did not want their children to ordain. And this allowance was made because the parents were clearly Mithya Dushrika, right? So these two. Why is it that this is so important? This is to cut the connection between the lay life lived and the monk life which is to be lived. The giving of a new name is to symbolify and to cut that connection, mental connection we would have to the life previously lived, so that one could say, I'm starting with a new clean slate, right? With Vipassana, although it can be rather difficult because we already have, our commitments and all of that, which also are sort of memories, the past and all of that. But with strong Vipassana, people can still do this. And without this, it is as if we are racing on in the stream of Vipassana. However, a leg is still being held back. There needs to be a clear differentiation between that person who lived and this person who is now. For example, I am ready, or I want to attain nirvana right now, this very instant. Now, this is a very difficult thought to master, right? Yes, I like nirvana, I'm very intrigued by it. All of that, I want to attain it in this very birth. But this very moment is a little bit demanding, a bit too demanding, some might say. This very moment, I still have to cook my dinner. I still have to feed my hubby. So, I hope I would be able to do that even after attaining in Nibbana. Right? So, we have these connections, you see. And that connection keeps us. That is where this sort of come with that sort of separation in the understanding. This is not a material separation, but this is in truly understanding cause and effect of the present than anything else. Cause and effect of the present than anything else. And when that happens, the effects of anusaya, karma, and consciousness, all three of these integral parts of our being, becomes or changes with that very thought. With that very thought. Do you have any questions? No questions?
Actually, Bhante, I do have a question.
Yes.
Is it about, when you say consciousness,
Yes.
What do you exactly mean by that? What consciousness are you talking about?
Consciousness, we are talking about the consciousness, the stream. In Sinhala, we call it Chitta Santana.
Exactly the same thing you want.
Right? Chitta Santana. The Chitta Santana, we know as the heart base, right? Or the seat of mind, right? So this is essentially referring to that rippling effect of consciousness, of Chitta Santana, which I believe is such a nice word, right?
Yes, okay, Bhante, I understand now. Thank you.
Get it? So it's not one specific. Maybe also another thing to add to that question is, now with consciousness applies the rules of consciousness, right? For example, within the Pathana, now we are going to be starting an introduction to Pathana in 4 weeks, by the way. Venerable Mind the Sara will be doing an introduction to Pathana, which we are not going into We are not going into the deeper categories of Pathana because you all can't do it right now, right? Because we had to do the Dhamma Sangani for that. But for now, we are going to be learning about what are the 24 parts of the Pathana, which I think would be really interesting, right, for you all to learn and to discuss about. So, parts of the Pathana, 24 rules of the Pathana. The rules, actually 24 conditional relations. These rules of the Pathana, right, are in effect in each and every moment within our Chitta Santana. So when we refer to, just as karma has a law of governance that we completely don't understand, just as Anusaya has its way of functioning and giving rise, cause and effect right there, Chittas with all these laws, conditional relations that operate within it, it too has. So when we refer to Kamma, Anusaya and Chitta, we are referring to all the laws that it is also governed by as well.
Oh, lovely. Thank you, Bhante. Yeah, now I understand. Thank you.
Thank you for asking that question. Dil, you want to ask something? Yes? Dil?
The same question was what I wanted to ask, because so when you have the five khandhas, Bhante, because this is the same thing I want to ask about consciousness, and you explain most of it now, because there when you say like Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana, consciousness, now, how I understood, that is quite different. That's a discriminatory sensory consciousness. Now, you're referring to consciousness as what comes from the Hadya Vastu, the vibratory that Chitta Santana. So this karma and this consciousness is a little different to that consciousness that the Vijnana that we speak of when you say Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana.
Well, the parts of the consciousnesses and the different attributes of the Chetasikas are that which are like ripples, isn't it? Right? And when an object arises, the consciousness works with this object in a particular fashion or manner, right? Conditioned by different sort of laws and governed by different laws and conditions and all of these things. But the base of consciousness, or there is a way that consciousness works and operates. And I think understanding that law or the way that consciousness, I mean, just like, Miri's question, what are you referring to as consciousness? In a way, because we understand that when an object arises, that consciousness arises for that moment and it ceases. And then there is another sort of a law of consciousness that keeps on, 17 mind moments and then goes into Bhavanga and then another cycle. We understand that this law. And through every passing moments, data is carried through these consciousnesses. I love to imagine that maybe in a similar way that Kamma and Anusaya too has a structure of some sort. However, we have not been taught that structure. We do not know much about that structure, right? However, as with every passing moment, a consciousness arises and passes away, arises and passes away. And through arising and passing away, we carry, although the consciousness demises or leads on to its demise, still data is carried out through the consciousnesses without a base consciousness, in a similar way. That is what we refer to as consciousness in this context.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah? All right.
So that it's like...
Manisha, you have a question, Manisha? Manisha, you don't have the question anymore, I suppose, then? Anyone else?
Bhante,
yes.
It's the Chitta Santana is the thought process, right? You're talking about the process, actually.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes. The process.
Yeah.
The process conclusive right?
Yeah.
Including the laws and governance and all of
Yeah,
that.
yeah. That's right.
All-
Yeah. So good example is it. Even the Aramana, which is the object, it has two characteristics. The in Pathana explain that Aramana Shakti.
Yeah.
So that's actually the power that brings Aramana into action, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's because I think that's explained in some of the books actually. The difference between the Pathana and the Paticca in the Paticca the cause and effects is explained as one-to-one relationship, whereas in the Pathana there's a third parameter into it. That's the Pratya Shakti, or I can't.
Yes.
Yeah, Shakti, because that Shakti is actually brings about some of these the activities, like when you have a flow of thoughts, uh, like Panchadvara into Sampaticana in Samtirna, that there's a hidden force which is Anyamanya Pacha or something like that. Oh, there are quite a number of Antara Samantara and Anyamanya, and there are some forces behind it that brings about the whole flow into action.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Whilst
Yeah.
whilst in the law of cause and effect, we would be talking about cause and effect.
Yeah.
Right? We within the Pathana we have Pache, Upanna, and Pache Sat,
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
which is dependent, that which arises dependent upon that dependent factor, and the force of that.
Yeah.
Right. Will not go into it.
Yeah. Okay. It's Bante Panyasara is going to do that. Yeah.
Mindasara.
Yeah, Mindasara. Sorry. Yeah.
Mindasara is going to do a foundational entrance
Yeah.
into the Pathana.
Okay. Yeah. That means all 24.
All 24.
Yeah.
All 24, which I think is nice, but we won't be able to go into the deeper calculations of Pathana, because you have to at least finish the Abhidhammata Sangraha and the Dhamma Sangani.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe I will start a Dhamma Sangani class in parallel and maybe cancel the Sutra class. Is that okay?
Yeah. That's
No, this is no. Yeah, but okay, maybe on another weekday we can start the Dhamma Sangani class. Because I think now you all can do the Dhamma Sangani without, because no, actually after we finish Rupa, I can start the Dhamma Sangani class, because you need to finish the Rupas for that.
Yeah.
But after the Dhamma Sangani, then we can go into the Pathana and the other studies on it, which will be exciting. Yes, Dev.
And this is following that question on consciousness. I don't know whether I heard this correctly. When Bhante Mahindasara was explaining, somebody asked a question, if the person who dies is not the same person who is born again, but it's not a different person. I thought he said, and I'm not sure whether I heard this right. So what he was saying is all phenomena would have the chittas, the chaitasikas, the rupa, and of course nibbana is separate. And that those three things, that the person who is born, that those three things wouldn't be there. So that's why you say that it's not the same person, that the chittas and the chaitasikas and the rupas are not what it gets born transferred there. So it is, so the thing that goes is this chitta santana, that is that goes into the next.
Well, the thing is, we can't refer to the Chitta Santana as the thing which goes. right? Because that insinuates Atma,
Right. Okay.
right? Because what we refer to as Chitta Santhana, as Dhamma stated, is a process.
So
Right?
it's more like a Shakti or a vibration or something like that.
No,
No.
it's the process.
That's it.
If you, the thing is here, there,
Yeah.
if you say it is a vibration of the Shakti, we are making it Atma. We can't make it Atma. Due to causes, there is an effect. When the causes cease, the effect cease.
So it's like the definition of a Chitta. The Chitta is a process.
Exactly. That, yes, that process, that energy,
That's energy.
that stream, yeah, that path, that viti, yeah, that is why we can't insinuate in any way. We have to be very careful, not when we are pointing or when we are sort of discerning what consciousness is, to not use ultimate senses of Atma in the clarification of what a Chitta is. It is always a process.
Thank you, Bhante.
A process, not the process.
Yeah.
You know?
Bhante, can I add to that one?
Yeah.
Actually, the why Buddha said nacha so nacha anyo, the reason is when you die at the chuti chitta, we get rid of all skandhas.
Yeah. Okay.
And you left with actually nama. And that nama is the actually which brings about the patisanji vinyana, triggered by the aramana, which is the last dying chitta aramana, right? So that's so in reality you get rid of all the panchaskandha, but nama is remain. Nama is the consciousness, really. So that consciousness is actually planting in your new birth, new life as a patisandhi vinyana. So there's a little bit of a conflict when Mahindasara explain it actually. So you get rid of the panchaskandha, but there's what do you say? Your past consciousness is actually replanted in the form of patisandhi vinyana. But in order to have the patisandhi vinyana, you have to have a aramana, or the object. Object is taken from your last dying chitta viti, right? So the explanation is that aramana is also Pathana, one of the Pathanas. So it has got a energy. That energy, the Pathana energy, is actually brings about the patisandhi vinyana, because in order to have a vinyana, you have to have an object. So that's at the moment I'm actually reading about some of the Pathana levels, where they in the Pathana levels actually they mention about patisandhi vinyana quite frequently. In it's very difficult to understand it.
And what is that which Venerable Mahindasara claimed?
Venerable Mahindasara said actually, he actually translate into your iPad, not iPad, iPhone. So when you send a message to iPhone, and various people can take it, right? So likewise, you get aramana into your patisandhi vinyana, which is not exactly correct, because the aramana Aramana and your resultant karma that brings about the Patisanna Vijnana.
Yeah.
Because there's no outside force in Buddhism.
No.
There's no electromagnetic waves in Buddhism.
Yeah.
So only power we have is Pathana Shakti.
Well, we don't call it Pathana Shakti, Dansiri.
Yeah, but in a simple terms, but it's the strength of Pathana.
The strength of the consciousness.
Yeah. Okay. Now, because if you say Aramana has Aramana Patya Shakti. There's one actually.
Aramana Pache Sati. Correct.
Yeah.
Aramana
Yeah.
Aramana Pache Sati is a part of the consciousness.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it comes down to, of course, I mean, it comes down to the power of the consciousness. Now, Padma, you want to say something, Padma?
Well, this is something not as deep as what we've been discussing, but can you remember you asked, said one day something about karma, the Chetana Vadaming karma way, and you said what causes Chetana, and you said it was Anusaya.
Sure.
Long time ago we had this discussion, and then since then I've discussed it with Mala too. Anusaya is unwholesome, isn't it? And it leads to unwholesome karma. And we are wondering what it is, but then we do create wholesome karma too, isn't it? So we want to know what the opposite term for Anusaya was. I mean, Anusaya has about 10 things, and we're wondering whether it is the just to go for the opposite of whatever, or is there a term? Is it Yonasa Manasikara?
Very, very good question, Padma. The first thing is there's a controversial, discussion between whether there is a kusala anusaya and whether it is only a akusala anusaya. Right? Now, what we usually hear about is the fact of akusala anusaya.
Yeah.
But remember, anusaya is that which gives rise to that which is bad.
Okay.
Right? That example, right? Now, anything that we do, anusaya gives rise to a certain types of phenomena in mind, which can mature to an extent where it can now give rise to physical or verbal intimation. This physical verbal intimation, or the step before when it just is in the mind, in both ways can lengthen samsara.
Yes.
Regardless of whether it is good or bad. Right? The middle path, which proposed a lifestyle which does not lengthen samsara, was a teaching by the Buddha. So it can be deemed that anusaya, now anusaya is there all the time. Even for a being who is asanna satta, anusaya is there. Right? But does the anusaya being there make a person bad? No. However, now that is a point to realize. Anusaya is there all the time. Even when you're meditating, anusaya is there. Even when you're going into the 8th jhana, anusaya is there. Anusaya necessarily does not make everyone bad.
Okay.
Anusaya, what anusaya does is kind of like a stone, thrown into a pool of water. It creates this ripple effect, right? Where it creates whatever sort of waves or whatnot. Right? That is what anusaya does. So with consideration to kusala and akusala, anusaya being there, both is done in a way now that lengthens, I'm sorry, not kusala and akusala, good and bad, wholesome and unwholesome karmas, right, are done in a way that it lengthens samsara.
Okay.
Even good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even if you do good, it lengthens samsara. Vipassana, or the understanding, or the vipassana phala, are the only ones that we know which can break the flow of anusaya.
Okay.
Right? So whilst there is two schools of thought, one saying that anusaya is only unwholesome, the other saying that anusaya can be both wholesome and unwholesome. Both wholesome and unwholesome. I actually know a professor who wrote his thesis. I might invite him for a conversation about this because he will know it much more. Whilst there are two schools of thought which believes one anusaya is only bad and then anusaya is good and bad, anusaya, it is important to understand that anusaya manages itself with this specific nature. What? Lengthening our existence in samsara.
Okay.
Bhante, did you say once, or am I making a mistake? Did you say once that even an arahant, now he doesn't have karma, but that anusaya is there? Did you say when you...
Arahant does not have anusaya, he has vasana.
That's what you said.
Yeah.
Okay, Bhante.
So that's vasana, right? So even now, that is an important, I wonder whether you understood Padma, what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, so I think what you said was that anusaya is, I mean, some people think anusaya is completely akusala, but it could be both good and bad.
No,
And
no. That there is another school of thought which
that's right.
it can be good or bad.
And that anusaya really prolongs life. And that in between, only vipassana is the thing that can, that can break that.
Sure.
That's what you said, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So when we take the different parts of anusaya, right? Tanha anusaya, ditthi anusaya, anusaya. Now, when we take all of these parts of anusaya, remember that the prime duty or the task of these anusayas is to lengthen samsara, to create another aspect to cling on to, much like the prapanchas. Right? Much like the prapanchas. So it is effectively doing that. Even in performing good and even in performing bad, anusaya effectively has its grasp upon our life. No?
Thank you. Yeah. That's interesting. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Anyone else?
Bhante,
Yes, Pushpa.
this Chitta Santana, consciousness, stream of consciousness, is there any association with conscience, the sense of right and wrong?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again, Pushpa?
The Chitta Santana, is there an association with conscience? Conscience is with the sense of right and wrong?
No.
No?
No. Chitta does not have a sense of that, right? However, Chitta has a way that it behaves. For example, Yonsmanskar and Ayonsmanskar, right? That is taken by the power of habitual behavior, right? How have we habitually trained ourselves, or what we know, or the power within the series of consciousness that applicates itself through the processes. You know what I mean? Now, for example, let's take, there is a person, his or her practice is in vipassana all the time. True practitioners eat, sleeps, and drinks a dhamma, or, example. Now, true practitioner, right? That the mind of that person works on another level, not enlightened, but a true practitioner, right? That mind of a person works at a certain level, at a certain caliber of mind, right? That is because why? Of training, right? Of training. Similarly, for example, when you were in your profession, at the height of your profession, everything that you did was for your profession. When when you were just, when your children were young, everything that you were doing was for your children. In certain ways, that kind of code is also present in Chitta. However, Chitta itself does not have a sense of right and wrong. However, through practice, through that training that we undergo, that sense can sort of have an effect, meaning it is from that knowledge that we build that we determine. The consciousness or the elements of the consciousness alone do not hold that ability. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Okay.
Right? So, which is to mean, for example, right at this moment, you do something. It is only if you continue doing it that it's going to substantially affect your life. At this moment, you sort of watch a documentary and you think, oh, this is really interesting. Maybe this is something I should do, right? For example. But the next moment, you forget about it and you move on, right? See, that didn't have much of an effect on you, right? However, if you kept at it, it might have now changed your perspective and view. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But one Chitta alone does not have the ability. That is to repetitive training. Right? This is actually, yeah. Yes, all right. Anyone else? I hope I answered your question, Pushpa.
Partly.
Partly?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm still wondering whether there's an association.
What do the others think? Does Chitta have an association with a sense of right or wrong?
Chitta Santana.
Chitta Santana. Chitta Santana. If it is a Chitta Santana, it would. If it is a Chitta Santana, it would. If it is a Chitta, it wouldn't.
Yeah, it's like the conscience, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, it would. Because you see, Yons Manskar and Ayons Manskar in Manodvara Vachana. It would. But one consciousness doesn't. Yeah?
Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Okay. I'm sorry, I missed it sometime a bit. Okay.
Bhante, another quick question. I heard another priest saying that Anusaya give rise to Asrava. And that's why we have to be careful that latent tendencies should not be allowed to develop into Asrava. Asrava is actually, is there any meaning in it? Asravas are the influxes.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. There is truth in that statement for sure.
Yeah.
However, how are we going to keep the Anusayas at bay is another question.
Yeah.
Right? Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Anusayas do give rise to the Ashravas.
Yes.
But how we keep it at bay is another story. Yeah, absolutely.
So, but is it then saying that the Anusas, they said, those are latent tendencies, and these are the overflows or the affluence. So when it spills over and comes out, that's when it's called asavas. Is that right?
Sorry, again.
So you have latent tendencies. So those are the anusas. So when in English, when you explain what are the asavas or ashravas, so now they are like the overflows or the effluents or the spillovers. So in other words, what was latent and was that when you had the circumstances that causes them to arise, so then when they spill over, then they are called answers. So the answers.
No, that's the thing is, it is really, for example, like throwing, like the effect of a rock being thrown into a pool of water, the ripple effect that it causes, right? And the anusaya, what it does, it creates vibrations, right? And because of this sort of these tendencies which is present, those tendencies keep impinging or sort of behaving or prompting behaviors of a certain way. Actually, not prompting behaviors, prompting emotions of a certain way, right? And those are on a different level. We do not call them sort of overflows or, it's not that the anusaya is developing now that it's called ashrava. The anusaya is there and it's creating something which is the ashrava.
Yeah, yeah.
It is not an overflow kind of a thing. You know what I mean there? Like, for example, the anusaya gives impinges with the consciousness develops into the motion of slapping someone. Right? Now, it's not the anusaya that is slapping. The slapping is done by a pariyuttana kamma.
Yeah, but in English, when you translate it, you call it, these are latent tendencies, and they call them, effluents or overflows or something.
Okay.
English translation of those.
Okay.
So
well, yes, I mean translations, understanding the way that it essentially works. I think that's important there. Yeah. Okay. So it's 8:34. Anyone else who wants to say anything? Yes. Yeah.
Bante, this Chitta Santana, that's the first time I heard that word. Is it something you describe it in English as conscience? So that means it's not one particular chitta, but it's a sort of a base-like thing? No?
No.
Okay.
It's process.
Ah, right. Okay.
Pathana is it's a process.
Okay.
Right. This process could be absolutely anything.
Mm.
Regardless, it's a process.
Okay.
Right, like the Chitta Santana. It is often used actually in Sinhalese.
Yeah.
Anyone else? If not, yes, Hema. Yes, Hema. Yeah. Yes.
Bante, is there any opposite of Ditta Dhamma Vediniya to Kusala side?
Opposite of Ditta Dhamma Vedaniya to Kusala side. What do you mean?
I mean Ditta Dhamma Vedaniya to Akusala karma, no? No?
Yes, there is.
What are those?
Well, a Kusala karma. Now, what is Ditta Dhamma Vedaniya?
It's instantly, yeah.
Right? So you can also experience a Ditta Dhamma Vedaniya Kusala.
Kusala, what is that?
An example
what are those?
Do you want an example of what it is?
Yes, example, yeah.
Well, an example of what it is might, for example, be, I mean, anything that you so desire. What do you?
No. I mean, there are the Ditta Dhamma Vedaniya is Akusala Kamma give results instantly, no? Something like that. So Kusala also there.
Ditta Dhamma Vedaniya Kamma are those kammas. It's not Akusala specific.
Right, okay.
It is a kamma that can give rise here and now.
Here and now, either Kusala or Akusala. Right. Okay.
Either Kusala or Akusala. Now, for example, it is somewhat like investing in your education, you know. You then reap the results of it, you know. So in a similar way, something that you do good in this, for example, you treat your friends with integrity and respect and dignity, you receive that back as well. Or you have choice friends around you, you know. So of course, I mean, those are very sort of action-based examples, but it is something like that. I mean, go figure, you know. So yes, so those numbers can effectively be good or bad.
Bad. Okay.
Like for
That's it.
example,
Yeah. Thank you.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. All right. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much. I will see you all on Saturday. We have the Zen talk, which is happening on Saturday. If you want to come for it, Udayan is speaking again, which is going to be at the same time. I think it was 3:30 or 2:30. At the same time we had it. I'll send out the poster soon, right? So take care and goodbye.